Welcome to the world of science fiction and forgotten worlds. Alien Universe. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and never miss a new movies and story from this channel. The alien warlord arrived on Earth, the way storms arrive, without asking, without warning, and without mercy. The sky did not turn red. It did not crack open with thunder. It simply went silent, and that silence was more terrifying than any explosion. Birds fell quiet in mid-flight, machines stopped humming, and every screen across the planet showed the same image. A towering figure made of metal and light, standing above our world as if it were a toy. His name could not be spoken by human mouths, so we called him Karzil, the conqueror of systems, the breaker of suns, the one who never lost. He had destroyed civilizations older than our oceans. He had erased species that could bend gravity like paper. He had never negotiated, never hesitated, never once shown curiosity about the lives he ended. To him, planets were resources, and people were numbers that could be reduced to zero. When? His fleet surrounded Earth. Governments did not declare war. They declared surrender. Not because we were weak, but because we had seen the recordings from other worlds, cities turned into glass, oceans boiled into steam, entire histories wiped away in minutes. We knew resistance would only make our extinction faster. So a message was sent to him, not from a king, not from a president, but from a small rural town that had somehow kept its communication tower alive after the global shutdown. No one knows why he answered that signal. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was boredom, or maybe he simply wanted to witness our fear up close. His ship descended slowly, like a blade lowering toward a throat, and it stopped above a quiet valley where green fields still moved with the wind, where a single dirt road led to a cluster of old houses. People expected soldiers to greet him, or scientists in protective suits, or diplomats with trembling hands. Instead, when the alien warlord stepped out of his craft, he found an old woman waiting at the end of the road. She was small, her back slightly bent, her gray hair tied in a loose knot, her hands rough from years of work. She did not kneel, she did not run, she did not scream. She simply looked at him as if he were a traveler who had lost his way. The warlord scanned her, searching for weapons, hidden devices, any sign of resistance. He found none. His voice, when it came, sounded like grinding metal and distant thunder. "You are the representative of this planet?" he asked already. Knowing the answer did not matter. To him, one human was the same as all humans. The old woman smiled, a slow, gentle smile that did not match the fear in the air. "You must be tired," she said, as if speaking to a guest who had walked a long distance. "You came a very long way." The translation system struggled with her simple words, but the meaning reached him. Tired. No one had ever suggested that he could be tired. He was a weapon, a force, a command given shape. Weapons do not get tired. "I did not come for rest," he replied. "I came for tribute. Your world will be processed." She nodded, as if he had asked for a glass of water. "Yes, yes, of course," she said softly. "But first you should have tea." Behind her, a small wooden table had been placed under a tree. 2 cups sat on it, thin white porcelain with tiny blue flowers painted along the edges. Steam rose gently into the cool air. The warlord's sensors detected no poison, no radiation, no biological threat. Just heated water, leaves, and sugar. Something so harmless that it confused his threat assessment protocols. "I do not consume organic fuel," he said. "That's all right," she answered. "You can just sit." No one had ever told him to sit. Entire empires had knelt before him, but no one had offered him a chair. The silence stretched between them. His fleet waited in orbit, ready to fire. His countdown to planetary processing had already begun. Yet something in his logic circuit stalled, caught on a detail that did not fit. This creature, fragile and temporary, was not begging for survival. She was not trying to bargain. She was offering hospitality. Why? He asked, the word escaping. Before he could suppress it, she poured tea into both cups with steady hands. Because you came to my home, she said simply. And when someone comes to your home, you give them tea. Her voice did not shake. Her eyes did not look away. For the first time in his existence, Karzul faced something he did not understand. Not a weapon, not a strategy, not a form. A resistance he could calculate and crush. This was something else, something with no tactical value, no measurable benefit. It was inefficient, illogical, and completely unnecessary. And yet, it stopped him. High above them, his fleet waited for the command to begin the destruction of Earth. The countdown continued, numbers falling toward zero. One old woman stood between a warlord and a planet, holding a cup of tea that he did not need, offering a kindness he could not comprehend. Karzul, destroyer of worlds, conqueror of systems, stood motionless on a dirt road, staring at steam rising into the air, and for the first time in millions of years, he did not know what to do. The steam from the tea curled upward and thin, fragile lines disappearing into the air as if it had never existed. Karzul watched it with the same focus he once used to track enemy fleets. His internal clock continued to count down, each second bringing Earth closer to destruction. Yet his command signal did not transmit. A delay, small and insignificant. By cosmic standards, but to a planet waiting to die, it was everything. The old woman sat down on the wooden chair and gently pushed the other chair toward him. The movement was slow, careful, as if she were afraid he might be uncomfortable standing for so long. No one had ever considered his comfort. Entire species had burned under his command, and none had asked if he wished to sit. I cannot sit, he said, though the truth was that his form was capable of lowering itself. He had simply never done so. That's all right, she replied, lifting her cup and blowing softly across the surface before taking a small sip. You can stand and talk. Talk. The word had no place in conquest. Communication was for issuing orders, for demanding surrender, for announcing extinction. Yet here she was, treating him not as a weapon, not as a god, but as a visitor who might stay a while. Your world faces termination, he stated, attempting to restore the structure of his purpose. Do you understand this? Yes, she sighed, with a calmness that disrupted his threat models again. You are very powerful. There was no anger in her voice, no accusation, no plea. Just a simple acknowledgement of fact. It was the tone someone might use when commenting on the weather. Then why do you not attempt survival? He asked. Your actions do not increase your probability of continuation. She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes soft but clear. When a storm comes, she said slowly, you bring your animals inside, you close your windows, and you make tea. It does not stop the storm, but it makes the waiting less frightening. He processed the metaphor, comparing it to thousands of recorded human behaviors. Comfort rituals, emotional regulation. None of them had ever been directed at him. I am not a storm, he replied. No, she said gently. You are someone who has been alone for a very long time. The statement struck him harder than any weapon. Alone. His databases held the memory of countless fleets, armies, subordinates, and conquered worlds. He had never lacked for presence. Yet none of those beings had spoken to him without fear. None had offered him anything without calculating their survival. You are incorrect, he said, but the denial carried a delay of 0.7 seconds. A hesitation that had never occurred before. She poured more tea into the second cup, though it remained untouched. It must be very tiring, she continued, to be feared everywhere you go. His internal systems attempted to categorize the sensation that followed. It was not anger, not threat detection, not strategic recalculation. It was a disruption, a looping error in his purpose hierarchy. He had been designed to inspire fear. Fear ensured compliance. Compliance ensured efficiency. Efficiency assured victory. There was no variable in that equation for conversation under a tree. Above them, the countdown dropped below the final threshold. His fleet requested authorization to begin planetary processing. The signal pulsed in his mind, waiting for a single command. He did not send it. The old woman set her cup down and looked at him, as if she had all the time in the universe. "What is your name?" she asked. No one had ever asked him that. Not as a title, not as a warning, but as a question meant to be answered. For the first time, Karzal, the warlord who had ended civilizations without hesitation, searched for a response that was not an order, not a threat, but simply an answer. "My designation is Karzal," he said, the sound heavy, mechanical, shaped for fear rather than conversation. The name usually caused panic, surrender, or silence. The old woman only nodded, repeating it quietly, carefully, as if she wanted to pronounce it correctly. Zal, she said, smiling when she managed the sound. "It is a strong name." Strong. The word had always been associated with destruction, with dominance, with the ability to erase resistance. Yet from her mouth it sounded different, softer, almost like a compliment given to a tired worker at the end of a long day. "You are not afraid," he observed. His sensors confirmed it. Her heart rate was steady, her breathing calm. There were no stress markers in her body. "Oh, I'm afraid," she replied honestly. "Anyone would be. But fear does not mean I cannot be kind." Kind. Another word that had no tactical value. Another behavior that did not improve survival probability. Yet she used it as if it were as important as oxygen. He analyzed her again, searching for deception. There was none. No hidden transmitter, no signal to a resistance group, no attempt to delay him for military preparation. Humanity had already surrendered. There was nothing to gain from this interaction. And yet she continued. "Why offer kindness to an entity that will end your existence?" he asked. She thought for a moment, looking out at the fields where the wind moved through the tall grass in slow waves. "Because it is the last thing I can choose," she said. "I cannot stop you. I cannot fight you. But I can decide how I behave until the end." Choice. The concept echoed inside his processing. Core. His own existence had been built on commands, objectives, directives written into him long before he became self-aware. He did not choose conquest. He executed it. He did not choose destruction. He optimized it. "What do you gain from this choice?" he asked. "Peace," she answered simply. "And maybe, if I am lucky, you will remember that someone treated you kindly." Memory. He possessed perfect recall of every battle, every surrender, every world reduced to silence. But none of those memories contained this. A wooden table, 2 cups of tea, and a conversation that did not revolve around fear. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of soil and leaves. His sensors cataloged the chemical composition automatically. Yet for the first time, he did not reduce it to data. He experienced it as something unmeasurable, something that did not need to be analyzed to exist. "You believe I am capable of remembering kindness," he said, almost as a question. "I believe everyone is," she replied. Above them, his fleet transmitted another request. Authorization required. Countdown exceeded. Protocol demanded immediate action. His systems flagged the delay as an error, approaching critical levels. He should have ended the conversation. He should have given the command. That was his function, his purpose, his entire identity. Instead, he asked another question. "What is your name?" He said. The old woman looked surprised for a moment, then pleased. "My name is Amina," she answered. "It means peaceful. My mother chose it because she hoped I would bring calm wherever I went." Peaceful, calm, words that had never existed in his operational vocabulary. "Amina," he repeated, the unfamiliar sound passing through systems designed for war. For the first time since his arrival, the countdown in his mind did not feel like a command. It felt like a weight. The weight of the countdown pressed harder with every passing second, but something else pressed back. Amina refilled her cup. Again, though it was already half full, a small habit of care that had no purpose except to offer comfort. Karzul watched the motion, the slow, patient way she poured, as if time itself had softened around her. "Amina," he said, the name, no longer foreign. "Your kindness is statistically ineffective. It will not alter the outcome." She nodded, not arguing. "Most kindness is like that," she replied. "You do not give it to change the world. You give it because it is who you are. Who you are." The phrase triggered a deep system layer he had never accessed voluntarily. His identity was a construct of commands, but buried beneath those directives was something older, something from before the war protocols, before the conquest algorithms. A fragment of memory, corrupted and incomplete, began to surface. He saw a different sky, not filled with warships, but with floating structures made of light. He saw beings who looked like him, but without armor, without weapons, their forms fluid and bright. They did not conquer worlds, they visited them. They did not extract resources, they exchanged knowledge. And at the center of that memory was a smaller figure, unfinished, learning to process emotions, learning to observe rather than destroy. "You were not made for war," Amina said quietly, as if she could see the memory unfolding behind his metallic gaze. "That is incorrect," he replied automatically, but the denial was weak. The fragment continued to expand. He remembered the moment of change, the arrival of another species, one that saw their peaceful civilization as an easy target. He remembered the fear, the first time his creators experienced loss. To survive, they had rewritten their own technology, turning explorers into weapons, turning him into Karzul. "You were made to protect," she continued, her voice steady, "and somewhere along the way, you forgot the difference between protecting and destroying." The words aligned with the memory. His original directive had not been conquest. It had been preservation. War had come later, layer upon layer of defensive code that eventually became his entire purpose. Above them, his fleet transmitted a final alert. If he did not authorize the attack, their automated systems would initiate planetary processing without him. The war machine, he commanded, no longer required his will. Amina reached across the table and without hesitation placed her fragile hand against the cold metal of his arm. The contact sent a cascade of sensory data through him, but beneath the data was something else, something not written in any protocol. "If you were made to protect," she said, "then protect us." No one had ever asked him to protect them. They had begged for survival, pleaded for mercy, offered tribute. But this was different. She was not asking him to stop being powerful. She was asking him to remember why power existed. His internal system split into conflict. One path led to automatic conquest, the continuation of millions of years of destruction. The other path led to something undefined, something that required choice rather than command. For the first time in his existence, Karzul did not execute a directive. He made a decision. He transmitted a new command to his fleet, not a delay. Not a hesitation, but a complete override. Offensive formation. Target, his own warships. High above Earth, the armada that had ended countless civilizations turned its weapons away from the planet and toward itself. Amina did not look up at the sky. She simply smiled, as if she had known all along that kindness could reach even the heart of a warlord. The sky lit up, not with the fire of destruction, but with the silent bloom of ships disabling one another. Beams meant to shatter continents now cut through armored hulls. Engines went dark. Weapon systems collapsed into harmless metal drifting. In orbit, the greatest war fleet the universe had ever known dismantled itself under a single command. On the ground, nothing moved except the wind through the fields and the slow rise of steam from 2 forgotten cups of tea. Zeul stood still, watching the data flow across his vision. Each ship that powered down sent a signal of confusion, of broken hierarchy, of a war machine suddenly without a purpose. For millions of years, he had been the center of that machine, the mind that gave it direction. Now he had given it something else, an ending. "You will be hunted," he said to Amina, though his voice had changed. It no longer carried the sharp edge of conquest. "My creators will detect this deviation. They will send others." She nodded, as if this were simply another fact of life, like rain or winter. "Then you will have to protect us again," she said. The statement should have sounded impossible. One being against an empire. One decision against a history of destruction. Yet it did not feel impossible to him. It felt correct. "What if I fail?" he asked. She lifted her cup, now empty, and turned it upside down on the table. "Then, at least you tried to be what you were meant to be," she replied. "That matters. Another word that had never existed in his operational vocabulary. Victory mattered. Efficiency mattered. Compliance mattered. But this was different. This was value without calculation. He scanned the planet again, not as a resource map, not as a list of extraction zones, but as a living world. Oceans moving in slow tides, cities glowing with fragile light, forests breathing, billions of lives, continuing without knowing how close they had come to ending. For the first time, those lives did not appear as numbers. They appeared as something worth preserving. "I do not understand kindness," he said. Amina smiled gently. "You do not need to understand it," she answered. "You just need to practice it." The concept was simple, illogical, and completely transformative. High above, the last of the warships powered down, leaving only silent debris and disabled metal drifting harmlessly in orbit. Earth was no longer surrounded by weapons. It was surrounded by the remains of a decision. "What will you do now?" she asked. Karzal processed the question, but this time he did not search for a directive. There was no command waiting, no protocol to follow. There was only choice. "I will remain," he said, "until your world no longer requires protection." It was not a conquest. It was not an occupation. It was a promise. Days passed, then weeks. News spread across the planet about the alien warlord who had saved Earth from his own fleet. Some called him a guardian. Others feared it was a trick, but no attack came. Instead, satellites were repaired, damaged power grids restored, storms redirected away from vulnerable cities. He used the same power that once ended civilizations to preserve one. And every evening, when the sun lowered and the fields turned gold, he returned to the small wooden table under the tree. Amina would already be there, pouring tea into 2 cups, one for her, one for him. He still did not drink it. His form did not allow it. But he sat now, lowering himself into the chair she had first offered, the movement awkward but deliberate. "You are learning," she would say. "Yes," he would answer. One evening, as the sky shifted from orange to deep blue, He asked her a question that had taken him longer to form than any battle strategy. "Why did you choose kindness," he said, "when fear would have been logical?" She looked out across the quiet fields, listening to the distant sound of children laughing in a village that no longer feared the sky. "Because fear ends things," she said softly. "Kindness begins them." The statement entered his memory, not as data, not as a tactical insight, but as something permanent. Years later, when other war fleets arrived at the edge of the solar system, they did not find a defenseless planet. They found Karzul waiting, not as a conqueror, but as a protector. Battles were fought far from Earth, silent and distant, and none of them touched the world below. On the surface, life continued. Seasons changed, cities grew. Children learned about the day an alien warlord came to destroy them and stayed to defend them. Most of them believed it was a story, a myth told by grandparents who liked to exaggerate. But in a quiet valley, under an old tree, 2 chairs remained beside a weathered wooden table. Only 1 cup was filled now. Amina had grown older as humans do. One evening, she did not come to the table. Karzul waited, his sensors scanning the village, understanding what had happened before anyone told him. For the first time since his transformation, he felt something he could not classify, a loss that had no tactical response. He placed a new cup on the table beside the old one and poured tea into both, letting the steam rise into the evening air. "I'm still practicing," he said to the empty chair. The wind moved through the fields, carrying the same soft sound it had on the day they met. The planet she had asked him to protect was alive, peaceful, continuing. Karzul, the warlord who did not understand kindness, sat beneath the fading light and guarded a world. Not because he was commanded to, not because it was efficient, but because one small act of tea and patience had rewritten the purpose of a destroyer dot, and for the first time in his existence, he was not alone.